Hello and welcome back to a very special episode of Let's Talk More on Monday. I'm your podcast host, Chloe, and today I am joined by our founder and my best friend, Arianna Cruz. We will be taking it back and talking about the genesis of More, the roots, how it all began, and where it has grown from there. A little bit about what our business model entails, the different aspects of More. And then if you head over to our Patreon, we're going to be getting a little bit into why we do what we do and giving you a little sneak peek into what's coming for the rest of the year. So if you are not subscribed to us on Patreon, head over there and save a seat with us. But for now, thank you for joining me, Arianna. I'm so glad to have you here with me today.
So excited to be here, and I think this is such a timely pod that we're doing too. We've grown so much in the last couple of years, and I feel like this year especially, as we have all of these new arms and services and places that we're starting to show up, especially with our interns and with our team, it'd be really great to kind of, like you said, take it back to day one, A1, and see kind of how we got this thing started.
Yeah, so a lot of people know that our first issue, our first article, all got published in October of 2020. But there is something that a lot of our general listeners, some of our even longtime fans may not know about. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about the very, very start of More, the first kernel.
Yes, for sure. And I feel like I don't often talk about it and I don't really think about it. We had an intern helping set something up where we were getting ready for a pre-launch happy hour. And one of them found my old business cards that had more on it in the middle. And I had all these aspirations of loving more, doing more, helping more,
Yeah.
whatever it was. And more really started back in 2018 after I had graduated college. I was working as a volunteer at the time with School on Wheels. They've since rebranded, but continue doing amazing, incredible things in the Indianapolis community to curb hunger and food insecurity, as well as making sure educational resources are available to kids regardless of their home situation. And so during that time, I had the honor of working with some of the parents of the kids that we were tutoring after school. And after graduating, I started this kind of, I don't know, it was like a partnership between a shelter and at the time School on Wheels, where we were working with parents to do resume prep and interview prep and just trying to figure out like how can we get the parents the resources they need so that then the kids are in potentially better situations. And as I was doing it, I was thinking of like, okay, well, like how do we reach the people who maybe aren't in these shelters, maybe people who don't have kids? Like it's an opportunity that should be reachable and accessible to other people. And um, me and my now husband were talking about it a lot in when I was in college, and I kept saying, I just want to make opportunities reachable for everyone. I just want people to love more. I just want people to care more and all these different things. And so the more he listened to me, because I was really just saying the same things over and over again, he helped me coin it and put it together in this compact, concise way. And by the time we got to this incredible collaborative project in 2020, more kind of fit this new version of what it was. We were trying to create conversation that would educate, inspire, and call people to action in different ways by making sure opportunities and resources were accessible and able to be understood by people who needed them.
Yeah, and we will talk about this in our Dig Deeper episode over on Patreon, but I do think that a big aspect of More that has really come to the forefront this past year has been education, just about a lot of different things, like
Mhm.
topical as things come up, as events happen, as we pass holidays, we try to help our user base just know more about what's happening in the world, what's happening in their communities, how to find ways to reach for things that they may not have known existed. So it makes sense that it didn't just start randomly in 2020, that this huge collaborative project didn't just like poof into existence, like it had been in the works for a very long time.
Yeah, at a minimum, the mission and like the understanding that and I think this is something that I struggled with too, and I think a lot of us can sometimes relate to, being on the forefront of like the volunteerism and the serving can, I mean, plainly, it can take a toll. Like, I mean, nurses are heroes because they are on the front lines of these physical, emotional, mental battles every single day. Same with volunteers across industries, across ways of serving. And I think for me, finding like my place in this ecosystem of trying to make the world better as we all are trying to do, I realized like my superpower, if you will, was being more of that connector. And I think, Chloe, especially as you've written about so many topics, I think about the period poverty like once a week, and the conversations that come from personal places and stories. And it's not like, we do educate, and if you look at our socials, like we include our sources page on majority of our carousels, but it's really educating on like the human experience even, and different people's backgrounds, because I think that that's the way that people can connect the best and understand things that maybe are a little bit harder to digest, understand, especially if you're coming from a different background. Hearing it from a person to another person, I think always makes it a little more approachable. And even if you're uncomfortable, you're understanding that it's another person's experience and not maybe just facts and numbers that like don't necessarily make sense to you, or that you have a harder time grasping.
Right. And empathy is linked to people. Like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people will say that they didn't understand something, didn't connect to it until they had a loved one that was going through that. And it's unfortunate that that's kind of how our human brains work, but it's true. We just
Mm-hmm.
can't connect to something until we can put a face to it. So I think a lot of what we have done is putting faces to it, giving you someone that you already love and letting them tell a story so that you can connect to something that you may not have anything to do with.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, it's like it's a double-edged sword, right? Like it feels selfish to be like, I didn't get it until it happened to me or until I knew someone close to me, but at the root of it, like we're humans and we crave that connection, and it almost then makes sense that we would be able to better understand something when we can connect to it. I
Right.
think it's been really cool as we started as a magazine, and now that we've really flourished into a full media company, having the podcast, having these video interviews, keeping the magazine on, and becoming more of a platform rather than a publication twice a year. It's really pushed us to think about like, how are we cultivating spaces for connection for not only the people we interview and whose voices we're telling, but the people who are on the receiving end of them. And I think because we're asking that question and we're continuing to center on making opportunities reachable for everyone, so it's been so incredible. And then also, I would say at times challenging to make sure, and I think that this is maybe just like part of being a business owner and being a mission driven business, because you want to grow but you also want to make sure you're staying centered on why you got started. But it's been really cool for us to evolve into a media company and be able to say that with our whole chest, that we are now a media company with all these different facets and ways to tell stories and save space for voices, with a business model that is making opportunities reachable for everyone.
Yeah. So when you say like a media company, for people that may not know, you know, at first we were publishing the magazine and then obviously we've branched off into the podcast, but like what else would you say that that entails?
I would include, I mean, we talk a lot about like our social media channels and the ways that we collaborate with a lot of people on there. So I think part of why we grew was because people were asking for it. We started with this magazine that came out twice a year, and it's incredible. It's still like our kind of our bread and butter, if you will.
Yeah.
But between issues, people are like, so is there another one?
It
Is there anything we can
takes a lot of
consider?
work. So
Exactly, exactly. It's like I read it cover to cover, like now what? And so we started doing our founder to founder series, and I was doing those once a month, and I feel like people are like, "Oh, good." And like wanting to meet all these women in business who started with this passion or started because of X, Y, and Z in this gap. And I remember Rahima with Hijab So Foreign was our first one. It was so fun. And I was like, okay, like this is it. So we have 2 magazines a year. Now we have these interviews once a month. And people are like, but wait, what about between those? Like, you're finding these businesses that are really great. Like, can you tell us about more of them? And so, I mean, Chloe, you and your expertise, like we started this podcast, we went back and forth on it, and then we're like, all right, let's do it. Like, there's so many stories to tell. And since then, we've started, I think, did we start every other week? I feel like.
Oh gosh, it's been years now, but I feel like
Crazy.
I know. I feel like we may have started every other week and then decided we just had too much to publish, so we started going weekly. But I feel like my favorite part of it has absolutely been getting to sit down with the contributors to each of
Mm-hmm.
the issues and letting them talk about the behind the scenes, like how the article came together, their writing process, what the photo shoot was like, and the impact that it's had on their family, their friends, their communities since the piece has come out, and like what they want people to take away from it. It's been really special to hear everyone's take on their own piece.
Mm-hmm. It's so cool, and it reminds me a little bit of like, remember Mrs. Eckert's storybooks in second grade of like, if you give a mouse a cookie and so on and so forth. And it kind of feels like that, because it's like we deliver this content, but then people want more. And I think it's amazing, because sometimes we feel like no one wants to hear from me. No one cares. I'm one person. And as
Right.
soon as you give them like a little bit, they're like, well, how did you get there? Why this? And so I love that we have all these different ways now that we can publish, and then we can interview them, and then they can talk more about it and like give the context to how they got to this personal essay that they've then written. It's so cool. And like, you're so right. Like, I love our interviews. And I used to say that like being on set during a photo shoot was my absolute favorite, because it's like we're embodying and capturing visually the feelings and the emotions that are in these different stories that we're sharing. And like the conversations on those days were so incredible. And
Yeah.
now we're getting to share some of those conversations weekly in these
Right.
different ways. And I just got chills thinking about it. I love everyone we've gotten to work with, and
For
it's
real.
been so incredible to be a platform. And I think for a long time I didn't realize that part of making opportunities reachable for everyone was creating space for people to share their stories and to share their voice, because it's something that I feel like, I don't want to say it's taken for granted, but when like being a magazine is what we do, I'm like, well, that's what we do. And like
Right.
now that we've grown as a media company, it really is what we do. And I mean, we have a couple of different ways that we make opportunities reachable for everyone, but at the base of it, like, it's so cool to me that part of what is game changing is just sharing
Right.
space and like being a platform.
Yeah. And, big shout out to all of our contributors and everyone who has ever made an issue happen. But, like, also big shout out to anyone who has ever asked more questions, commented on our socials, sent us an email. Like, you have no idea the impact that that has made, and that's like boosted us forward. Just
Mhm.
knowing that people are out there, they're appreciating it, they're listening, they're asking for more. And I hope that if you're listening to this and you're one of those people and you're feeling that, we're shouting you out personally right now, that you know that we're always looking to tell more people's stories. Like, if you have a story that you want to tell, that's what we're here for, and you should hit us up for that purpose, not just to be like, well, what if you did this? Like, what if you told your story?
Really, I feel like that's such a good segue too, and I know I'm jumping ahead in our outline, but we're so jazzed. Our upcoming issue is going to be our women's issue, debuting in October 2024, and our theme is going to be identity. I feel like identity is always very loosely woven into a lot of our articles, especially like the personal essays. But I'm so excited that we're going to be like really just honing in on it. Like, I think in this last year, we've done so many different interviews, especially with the New Year, New Mindset interviews that we did, where we're
Yeah.
talking about like how we're rediscovering who we are, or rediscovering the people who made us who we are. in these different ways. And I think huge shout out to Heidi Lopez. We interviewed her. She is a graphic designer, an intentional designer who talks about the way that design communicates and the ways that our identity can often not really get to be as organic as it could be until you live on your own or you like step out of your comfort zone, because then you're no longer kind of taking on the identity of those around you, and like you really have to like figure out who you are, which I had never really thought about. And I'm so thrilled. So we have a couple of articles in the making, but like Chloe said, we are open submission. A lot of people ask like, how do you curate? How do you do all this stuff? And like, we have ideas. Don't get me wrong. We're very creative people, but we also know incredible souls. And so I remember I was talking with like Lativa, and she was talking about wanting to like share their brand story. And she's like, what do we have to do to make that happen? And I'm like, girl, you just did. Say less. Here's your deadline. Let's go. And it was amazing.
I'm already writing a spreadsheet, like
right? Done. Her and Starla, oh my gosh, they were incredible. Loved listening to their interview after the fact. And we'd had them on for Founder to Founder, and then we had them in print. And Lativa came back and modeled for Beauty. She moderated. The creme de la creme of panels for the pre-launch happy hour. And I mean, even I don't want to keep talking too much, but identity issue 9 coming this fall, open submissions. We mostly accept them. I mean, really anyway, you can send them in a message. Best email is hello@moremagazine.org so the whole team sees it. And yeah, we want to be a platform. We want to be a big old microphone and just hand it off.
And something I say a lot in our contributor interviews and just interviews with whoever we may have on the show is that once you're a friend of More, you're always a friend of More. So even if you contributed for issue 1 and we haven't heard from you since, if you came back, like, we would be so excited.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Shout out to Hannah Jordan for coming back time and time again with us.
Period.
And sharing her gift, because we love it. We love it.
And speaking of throwbacks, we will be getting a little bit more into that if you head over to our Patreon and save a seat with us. So make sure to do so if you want a little sneak peek of what might be coming for the rest of the year. But I think we're going to wrap this episode up, and we are so excited that you have been here with us for all of this time. I mean, technically, publicly 4 years, but more like 6 if we're going to be like so for real about it. So thank you to all of our friends, our listeners, our contributors, anyone who has ever touched More in any way. We love you so much.
So much. Thank you for seeking more with us.
Yeah, and if you have any other questions, we love to field them. That's why we do these little interim interviews where we just talk about our business model and what's coming next and what we appreciate about what we do, because you guys want to know. So thank you for listening. Thank you, Arianna, for joining me.
Thanks for having me. So excited.
And make sure to head over to our Patreon and save a seat with us.
Yeah, let's dig deeper.
But for now, thank you for talking more with us on Monday. And as always, thank you for listening.
See you next time.